Hey, how's it going? It's Nick here. And a few videos ago, I talked about, some DIY cheap uh, alternatives to having a nice big drying rack. But for me, I've been in studios with drying racks, and it was all too nice. I kind of got used to it, and I really wanted a drying rack. But in my studio, I don't really have the space for a drying rack. Also, drying racks can be really expensive. They have lots of hardware that go into them. And so I thought about what if I could make my own drying rack? And really the star of the show comes when I found these springs. And so, with all these racks, they're each needing 2 springs each, and springs can add up. They can be kind of really expensive actually. But when I found this pack of springs, I thought, you know what? Maybe this could be affordable. When you can get springs this cheap, maybe we can do this. And if I use 3D printing so that all of the racks are really light and they don't have to hold that much weight, this could actually work. And so let's talk about some of the design considerations when I was designing this. And so when I made this, I really wanted it to hold an 11 by 15 of paper, a quarter sheet of paper, because most of my presses are only 12 inches wide. I wouldn't print any bigger than this. And it just coincidentally happens to be the maximum size of my 3D printer. I can print 400 millimeters wide, and so an 11 by 15 rack is the way to go. Anything smaller, I might as well just use my spring rack. It wouldn't really make sense to make like a 4 by 6 drying rack, because this does a job a lot better, a lot cheaper. And if I'm gonna print a ton of these racks, I'm gonna need a lot of filament. So I got myself the big spool of PLA, and I chose PLA because it's like the stiffest and it's the most affordable of these materials. If I end up spending like $500 on this project, it wouldn't really be worth it. I might as well kind of buy a used drying rack. But PLA is cheap, and that stiffness is kind of what I need for it to support the paper with such a little amount of material. So I'm going to print a few structural pieces. That's all I really need to print for the frame. And then I just need to print all of the racks. And each rack took about like an hour and a half for me to print, and so it ended up being able to print like somewhere between like 6 to 10 racks a day, so it took quite a few days of printing for this. After that, we need to put in some heat set inserts, and normally I'm a fan of just biting your screws and bolts straight into the plastic, but because we need to do this 150 times and these screws are going to be under constant load because of the springs, I figured it might be better to do some heat set inserts for the ease of assembly, and of course disassembly in case you break a rack or something and you need to replace it. It would be a little bit more sturdier in that regard. And so I'm just using some M3 heat set inserts and a heat set insert tip on a soldering iron to press it in. And then here I've got a gigantic pretty much lock nut, and I'm just using it for a big flat metal surface, and I'm going to use that to kind of press the heat set insert flush with the surface of the project. If you've ever done a lot of heat set inserts before, you might know that the plastic kind of swells around the bolt, and it's not a bad thing, but I kind of like it when everything's nice and flush and flat. And so I'm just going to use this to kind of press that plastic back down. Anyway, I'm going to put 25 of them into this little side frame here, and then I'm going to move on to each rack, and each rack's going to need 2 of these heat set inserts on each side. And so I'm going to stand it up, put 2 heat set inserts into this side, flip it over, and do the same for the other side. And this is probably the most tedious part of this whole thing, but put a movie on in the background. And once you've got all those heat set inserts in, your prep is complete, and we're ready to start putting all these things together. And so I'm going to take these little 3D printed pieces of the frame, and I'm going to start by putting some M3 screws through one end and these little drop-in T-nuts on the other end. I'm just going to get those prepped together. And once these are together, I can kind of slide it into this 2020 extrusion, and you do that 3 more times, you get yourself a nice little square that's going to be the bottom frame for this piece. And if you've got little rubber feet lying around, I don't know, I like to add some rubber feet to this thing so it doesn't slide around quite as much. It doesn't really matter which side of the extrusion you attach it to, but that side will become the bottom. Now we can flip it over and start attaching kind of like the upper frame part. And so we're going to need ourselves our frame pieces, and they're marked with a left and a right, so you know which side. And so when I say left and right, I'm referring to like when I'm staring at it, the racks are in front of me. That's, you know, my left and right. So just like I did with the other drop-in T-nuts, I'm just going to go ahead and pop in some M3x10 bolts over here down at the bottom. You'll see that you know, they're not the ones next to the heat set inserts. I'm going to kind of put on some of those drop-in T-nuts. And so I'm just going to need right now 2 for the bottom or 3 more for the side. And so I'm going to slide this little frame piece onto the extrusion, and then I'm going to go ahead and tighten those bottom 2 nuts pretty much. And I'm not going to tighten it all the way. We still need to slide it around and figure out its final position before I really want to lock it into place. But I'm going to loosen it in there, or tighten it in there just enough so that, you know, it's not sliding around everywhere and it kind of stands up on its own. And once I've got both sides of the frame on, I'm going to go ahead and attach my first shelf. And so I'm just going to use an M3x10 cap head screw, and then we're going to go into that kind of backmost heat set insert on the rack. That's going to be the hinge point, and that's going to attach in kind of like the further out part of hole of the little frame piece, not into the heat set insert part, but the full like pass through kind of hole part of it. And I'm just going to do that for one side, and then we're going to do that for the other side, and then we're going to have this little rack on a hinge. And once you've got one of the racks installed, then we can start setting the location of the frame. And so you can see here I'm kind of pushing that rack back until it kind of becomes flush with the front frame. You could set it back a little bit further if you wanted to, it would still work. I like to have mine kind of flush with the front, looks kind of nice. And so then I'm going to go ahead and tighten up those bottom 2 kind of drop-in T-nuts, kind of really lock in the position of this frame. And so once you're done with that, you can kind of slide in the vertical part of the frame. And so here I've got this kind of 80 centimeter V-slot extrusion, and it's just going to get slid down next to these kind of side frames and through all of those little T-nuts. And then it's going to butt into the bottom of that bottom extrusion, and I'm going to take my hex wrench, tighten up those bolts on the outside of it, and just kind of lock it into place. Next up, I'm going to use some 2020 kind of corner bracket stuff. They came with my extrusion, so why not use them? And then that's just going to kind of reinforce that bottom little joint right there. Make sure it doesn't really bend or anything like that. Safe and sturdy. And because I have to push the limits of this at least just once, I'm going to go ahead and add a second layer of frames to this drying rack, so I can see like if I can fit like 50 racks on this thing. I've made prototype, you know, like a 25-30 rack one, worked just fine. We're going to see if we can go all the way up to 50. And so here I am adding another set of frames, and that's just going to attach onto the extrusion just like before. And then we're just going to attach this little stop piece to the top of the frames, and that just makes it so that the first rack doesn't just fly all the way back once we lift it up. And just like with the bottom 2 extrusions, I'm going to go ahead and attach this little frame brace to the top, and you know, clips in just like the other 2, and that's just going to keep the spacing at the top of the rack. And with that, the frame is done, and we're ready to start adding racks to this thing and make it a full drying rack. And so now I'm going to go ahead and grab the rest of my racks. I've kind of got it color coded, and so it goes 4 gray racks and then 1 purple rack. That way I can kind of just keep track of things at a glance. And you're like, oh, you know, I'm 10 into the addition, 20 into the addition. Makes things a little bit easier. I don't know, a little bit more fun. Yeah, just like that first rack, I'm going to go ahead and start attaching it, just the hinge part of it. I'm not going to do anything with the springs just yet, but I'm going to attach everything and just get it in place on this rack. And as I'm putting this together, I'm starting to realize that I might have bit off more than I can chew, I'm starting to realize that this is starting to become a really tall drying rack. Like these top few racks are starting to get like above my eye level, and it might be a little bit impractical to use, but we're gonna go ahead, trudge along and just see what it's like to use this extra tall drying rack. And there is a nice sense of accomplishment once all of these racks are kind of like loaded in there. It's pretty fun to look at, but they don't stay up on their own very well without the help of a spring. And so that's what we've got to add next. And so to do this, I'm going to take one of my M3x10 bolts and I'm going to screw it in with the spring onto the back end of this frame. And so that's the shorter screw. And the spring's going to be a little dingle-dangly for now. And I'm not going to screw the head so it's flush in with the plastic. I'm going to leave it sticking out like about 4 millimeters or so. You'll feel the resistance in the plastic as it kind of gets to its limit. And then we're going to use this hole to attach this M3x20 bolt together. And so I'm going to take this bolt, I'm going to thread it through the other end of the spring, and then I kind of have to pull it a little bit taut to kind of get it into position so that I can screw it into the rack. And so this one, make sure that you don't send it in through at an angle. Try to get it in as straight on as you can. If you need to flip the rack up into its more relaxed position, you can also do that. And I'm just going to kind of send it on through until I can feel like a little bit like it pushes a little extra plastic out the other side, or if the bolt touches the other side of that opening, then that's where I usually stop. And then once that's done, I do the other side, and then we've got one rack done. Just gotta do it like 49 more times. And so you see when I lift this up, it will stay up, and I had to do a lot of math and a lot of trial and error to find this kind of a over center switch state, and so that it stays down or it stays up but not really in the middle or in between, and it couldn't use too much pressure because then it will deform the PLA and it will break down over time. And so there was a lot of engineering involved with kind of getting this at the exact right position. Anyway, 2 springs down, just 98 more to go. And so I opted to use a drill to make this go by a little bit faster, being very careful not to over tighten or break the plastic. And with all of that done, we now have our 50 rack drying rack, and it's quite a sight to behold. Pretty much all except for the last rack will stay up on its own. A little bit debatable if there's a super heavy piece of paper in there, but you can slide them down individually, you can kind of lift them up in a group. It's pretty cool. And now, because we got the hinge working, doesn't mean it's a finished drying rack. You can see that paper still slides through out the back because there's nothing stopping it from the back. And so we're going to need to fix that. But so far, everything's going as planned. And so I've got some thick linen thread. You could use really any string or any sort of rope, but this stuff is a nice, good enough, strong enough duty thing for me to work with. And so I'm basically just going to take it, tie it up at the top, and then kind of drop the whole spool down through these holes. And it needs some help sometimes to make it all the way to the bottom. But once it does make it out the bottom, I'm just going to take it and then tie it down to this other piece of the frame here. And you don't want to tie it too tight because it's going to distort the frames. But not so loose that it slides around too much. This is just fine right here. I just need the string to exist so it stops papers from flying back. And so now when I put a print on this rack and I lift it up, that piece of string is going to stop it from sliding out the backside. And that's all it really needs to do. Now that works well for this one big sheet of paper, but if I plan to put smaller prints on here, I'm going to want strings through the other 4 holes just so it doesn't slide out either side of that rack. So it's great for holding one sheet of paper each, but the reason why studios always get drying racks is because they can accommodate a wide range of paper sizes. So you can do smaller prints or bigger prints all on the same rack. And so I've got some smaller prints here, and for the size that I usually work with, we can fit 4 of these smaller ones on here, which is kind of nice. And it kind of keeps everything compact. I still like my little spring rack and I keep it around, but this is a nice option too. And one of the other design decisions that I did, the little hexagons, you can kind of use them and tuck the corner of your prints into the little angled parts of the hexagons, and it stops them from sliding around too much. You can see this one still needs a string in the back, but putting it down, those hexagon angles kind of stop some of the front ones from sliding back a little bit. And so here's my little prototype one. This one I managed to fit 30 on a rack for like maximum density, but it also requires more than one set of springs, and so I decided to go with 25 for the final version. But this one's kind of color coded, 5 of each color. I don't know if I like this better or worse than just having one color and then one different color every 5, or just 5 of each color. In the end, I think this drying rack project was somewhat of a success. I ended up spending about $84 on materials just for this half rack one, the 25 racks. And so it's less than $100, which is pretty cool for a drying rack. Ultimately, do I think it was worth it? Between 5 different days of 3D printing and another day of assembly, it took a lot of labor and time in addition to those $84. Not to mention, I found this drying rack on Blick. It's it's only like $300, and it's a lot bigger than these racks. And you get so much more capacity. It's a lot sturdier. It's not plastic. PLA, I can't really take this into really hot areas. As a metal one's a lot better. So I don't know if it was worth it or not, but I do think it's really cool to have this tiny little drying rack that I can move around my studio, and it's the perfect size for what I do in my studio. And so maybe this video will inspire you to make your own drying rack. I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. Someone might have the desire to do it. And if you want to do that, go ahead, check out my website or the print rules page for some instructions on how to do so. If for some reason that you want to buy one, I can't sell this for $84. I got to factor in my time. But if you want this nice, compact little drying rack for your studio, maybe you're more space constrained, you can't buy the metal one or something like that, I'll have it on my website too. Anyway, thanks for watching. Keep on printing. I'll see you in the next video.